The night she caught her boyfriend in bed with her best friend was the same night she met the billionaire who'd change her life forever. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just stood there, frozen, watching the man she loved whispering the same lies into another woman's ear. Her best friend's perfume hung heavy in the air. The sheets she bought last month were tangled around their bodies, and the laughter she used to love now sounded cruel. Something inside her didn't just break, it burned. Quietly, Aaliyah Monroe turned away. No shouting, no begging, only the sound of her heels echoing down the hallway, like the heartbeat of a woman who finally realized she had been loving the wrong people her whole life. Hours later, she walked into a small bar called the Velvet Room. The lights were low, the music soft, the world quieter. At the counter sat a stranger, calm, confident, eyes like the ocean before a storm. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he was a billionaire. All she knew was that for the first time in years, someone was looking at her, like she mattered. Rain tapped against the windshield as Aaliyah drove with no direction. Her vision blurred, not from the storm, but from tears she refused to wipe away. The wipers moved back and forth, slow and useless, like the rhythm of her thoughts. Her mascara had run down her cheeks. The city lights smeared into soft colors outside the glass. She pressed harder on the gas, chasing nothing, running from everything. 2 years of love, 5 years of friendship. All of it, gone in a single heartbeat. She pulled over beneath a flickering streetlight. The world outside blurred with the rain, and for a long time she just sat there. No music now, only the sound of water hitting metal. A whisper escaped her lips, half sob, half breath. Why wasn't I enough? No answer, only silence. Thick, endless, heavy. It filled the car the same way betrayal had filled her chest. And in that silence she broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like glass cracking under pressure no one else could see. The rain slowed by the time she reached Midtown. Neon lights shimmered across wet pavement, reflecting red and gold. A sign flickered. The Velvet Room Lounge. Aaliyah parked, stepped out, and let the cool air bite her cheeks. Inside, the world changed. Low jazz, dark corners, soft laughter. A place where people came to disappear. She slid onto a stool at the bar, her coat still damp. "Tequila," she said. "Double." The bartender nodded and poured without a word. The first swallow burned, the second numbed. She exhaled slowly, like trying to breathe out the last 2 years. From her left, a calm voice. "At that pace, you'll be singing by midnight." She turned. A man sat 2 stools away, tall, composed, wearing a charcoal shirt with sleeves rolled up. Amber liquid swirled in his glass, catching the light. Something about his tone made her pause. Not flirtatious, just human. She lifted her glass in a small salute. "Maybe that's the plan," she said. He smiled, not wide, not forced, just enough to show warmth. "Rough night?" he asked, voice deep and smooth. Aaliyah almost laughed. "Rough year." He nodded, as if he understood before she explained. The stranger's name was Dominic Cross. His eyes held something steady. Not pity, not desire, just understanding. He listened while she spoke in fragments. How betrayal didn't just break her heart. It made her question her worth. Dominic didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cliches. When she finished, he said quietly, "Anyone who cheats on you doesn't deserve you." People like that take love for granted, until they lose the kind that's real. His words landed softly, but they hit hard. Something in her chest eased for the first time all night. She looked at him, really looked. There was calm behind his confidence, kindness behind his strength. Aaliyah managed a small smile. "You sound like you've been there." He lifted his glass. "Different story, same ending." They talked for hours. Stories of heartbreak turned into laughter. Between jokes and quiet pauses, something shifted. Soft, dangerous, magnetic. Dominic leaned closer, eyes catching hers over the rim of his glass. Neither spoke. The silence between them felt alive. Her fingertips brushed the stem of her drink. His hand rested near hers. That tiny space between them pulsed with unspoken truth. Two lonely people meeting at the edge of exhaustion and hope. "You ever do something just because it feels right?" she asked. Dominic smiled, slow and knowing. "Sometimes that's the only reason worth doing anything." Aaliyah breathed out a laugh, soft, disbelieving. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt something other than pain. He stood, dropped a few bills on the bar. "Come on," he said, his voice low, steady. "Let's do something crazy tonight." She hesitated only a moment before sliding her hand into his. Why not? Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed around them. Red, gold, alive. And for a fleeting second, Aaliyah felt the world turning in her favor again. The night air was cool as they walked side by side through the quiet streets. Neither spoke. Words felt too small for what was happening between them. A boutique hotel stood ahead, elegant and understated. Dominic stopped, looked at her once, not asking, just waiting. Aaliyah nodded. That was all it took. Inside, the room was warm, washed in amber light. For a moment, they stood apart, still unsure. Then he reached for her hand. The touch was gentle, steady. Their breath slowed, their hearts quickened. He kissed her, softly at first, then deeper, like two people trying to remember what being alive felt like. It wasn't lust, it was need. The need to feel seen, touched, wanted. They moved together slowly, tenderly, as if mending something broken inside each other. And when silence filled the room again, it was peaceful, not empty. Outside, the city hummed below, unaware that two lost souls had found a moment of stillness in its chaos. Soft light crept through the curtains. Aaliyah opened her eyes to find Dominic still asleep beside her. He looked different now. Calm, unguarded, almost boyish. For a long time, she watched him breathe. She hadn't felt this quiet inside in years. The night had changed something. Not because of passion, but because for the first time she'd let herself be free. She slipped out of bed quietly, gathering her clothes from the floor. The air smelled faintly of his cologne and hotel linen. Before leaving, her eyes caught a flash of red, the lace panties she'd worn. She hesitated, then smiled faintly and laid them on the pillow beside him. A small, reckless souvenir from a night she would never forget. As she closed the door behind her, she didn't look back. Whatever this was, it belonged to the night. Morning would demand something else. Outside, the city was already awake, and so was she, in a way she hadn't been in a very long time. The weekend passed in a blur of boxes and silence. Aaliyah packed her life into suitcases, each one heavier than it should be. Every photo, every memory of Marcus and Chanel felt like salt on an open wound. When she handed over the apartment keys, she didn't say goodbye. She simply left, leaving ghosts behind in every corner. Her new studio was small but bright. Bare walls, one window, a couch that smelled of new fabric. Empty, but hers. She stood in the middle of the room, breathing in the quiet. "New space," she whispered. "New life." For dinner, she made tea instead. No music, no phone calls, just her reflection in the dark window. A woman learning to exist on her own. For a brief moment, she thought of Dominic, of the warmth in his voice, the steadiness of his eyes. Then she shook the thought away. That night wasn't real, she told herself. It wasn't supposed to follow her here. But deep down, she already knew it would. Monday came too soon. At Monarch Creative, the air buzzed with excitement. The company was announcing its new creative director, someone flown in from New York. Aaliyah tried to focus on her coffee and emails. She told herself it didn't matter. Just another Monday. Still, her pulse raced with nerves she couldn't explain. By 10, everyone gathered in the glass-walled conference room. Laughter, small talk, rustling papers. Aaliyah took a seat near the middle, her heart steady but guarded. Then the door opened. Footsteps, calm and sure. The CEO's voice boomed. Everyone, meet our new creative director, Mr. Dominic Cross." Time froze. Aaliyah looked up. He was there. The man from the Velvet Room. The man from that night. Dominic looked professional, collected, every inch the powerful executive. But when his eyes found hers, something flickered. Shock, recognition, restraint. Her stomach dropped. Her hands tightened around her notebook. She tried to breathe. The universe, it seemed, wasn't finished with her yet. Dominic began to speak. His tone was confident, smooth, practiced. The voice of a man used to leading. Aaliyah barely heard the words. Her heart pounded too loudly in her ears. Every sentence he spoke felt like a reminder of the night she was trying to forget. Then, mid-speech, his gaze met hers. Just for a second. Enough to send a shock through her chest. His mask was perfect. Hers was trembling. He looked away first, continuing his presentation as if nothing had happened. Aaliyah forced a polite smile, pretending to take notes. Inside, she was falling apart all over again. When the meeting ended, the team applauded. Dominic thanked them, his tone composed. But before she could leave, his voice stopped her. "Ms. Monroe," he said, glancing at his list, "could you stay a moment? I'd like to discuss your campaign." Her breath caught. Around them, the room emptied slowly. The glass door closed with a quiet click, and in that silence the past and present collided. Two people bound by a night neither of them could undo. The door closed softly behind the last employee. Silence settled like fog. Dominic leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. His expression was calm, but his eyes gave him away. "I didn't know," he said quietly, about you being here." Aaliyah stood near the door, her hands gripping her notebook. "I didn't know either," she answered, voice barely steady. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them thickened with everything unsaid. "It was one night," she said finally. "A mistake. We don't need to make it more complicated." Dominic's jaw tightened. "It wasn't a mistake, but I understand." She looked at him then. Really looked. The man who had made her laugh, who had seen her pain. Now, he was her boss, and she was trapped between gratitude and fear. He exhaled slowly. "You have nothing to worry about. Professionally, I'll treat you like everyone else." She nodded once. "Good." But as she reached for the door, his voice followed her. "For what it's worth, I'm glad I met you, even if it was the wrong way." Her heart stung. She didn't turn around. Later that week, their paths crossed again in a smaller meeting. Every word, every glance felt deliberate, careful. Dominic kept his tone neutral, his compliments brief. Aaliyah kept her focus tight, pretending not to notice. When the meeting ended, he lingered. "We act like we've never met," he said quietly. Her pulse jumped. "That's for the best." Their eyes met, a split second too long. No words could hide what still lingered there. "I'll reassign some of your projects," Dominic added, professional again, "to avoid complications." "No," she said quickly, "that would raise questions. Let's just work, like normal people." He hesitated, then nodded. "Colleagues, nothing more." She forced a small smile. "Exactly." But when she left the room, her chest ached with something sharp and familiar. Distance didn't make it disappear, it only made it louder. Outside, she leaned against the wall, breathing through the ache. Inside, Dominic sat at his desk, staring at the door she'd just closed. Two professionals, both pretending not to remember the night that changed everything. Days passed, wrapped in the rhythm of work. Aaliyah poured herself into every campaign, every late-night idea. Her creativity came alive again. Sharper, stronger. During one meeting, Dominic stopped mid-presentation. "That's brilliant, Ms. Monroe," he said. "The campaign concept is fresh, emotional, and strategic." The room turned to her. Compliments from him were rare. Aaliyah smiled politely, hiding the pride glowing in her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Cross," she replied, voice calm though her pulse raced. From the back of the room, someone watched. Chanel Rivers. Her perfect hair, her cold eyes, Recognition flickered, followed by something darker. After the meeting, Chanel lingered in the hallway, her gaze sharp as glass. Aaliyah passed without stopping. For once, she didn't look back, but she felt it. That chill of someone planning something she couldn't yet see. Back at her desk, she tried to shake it off. She wasn't the same woman who used to break under pressure. She had rebuilt herself, and she wasn't going to let anyone, not Chanel, not rumors, take that away. 2 days later, Aaliyah found herself in the company cafeteria. Her lunch untouched, her mind still busy with deadlines. Then, a shadow fell across the table. "Hey," Chanel said softly, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Can we talk?" Aaliyah looked up slowly. "About what?" Chanel sighed dramatically, placing her tray down. "About what happened. I feel terrible. Marcus and I... It just happened." Aaliyah's stare didn't waver. "You broke something that can't be fixed." The fake remorse on Chanel's face slipped, replaced by something colder. "You don't have to be dramatic," she said. "We all make mistakes." Aaliyah stood, gathering her things. "Some mistakes destroy people. Others reveal who they really are." She walked away, leaving Chanel fuming behind her. But as Aaliyah left the cafeteria, she could feel it again. That same burning in her chest. Not heartbreak this time. Anger. And behind her, Chanel's smile returned. Thin, sharp, dangerous. Like someone who had just decided to start a war. By the end of the week, the whispers had begun. "She's sleeping with the boss." She knew him before he started. That's why she's getting attention. Aaliyah felt it in every glance, every half-smile from coworkers who used to trust her. Her stomach twisted each time she walked through the office. She worked harder, spoke less, smiled through the silence. Every success now felt poisoned. Dominic noticed the shift. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her laughter disappeared. But he said nothing. Not yet. He needed to find the truth first. In the break room, Aaliyah overheard 2 voices. "Guess sleeping with power pays off," one woman joked. Aaliyah froze, the coffee cup shaking in her hand. She left without a word. That night, Dominic stayed late, eyes on his computer screen, tracking emails and access logs. He already had a suspicion, one name that fit the pattern: Chanel Rivers. And while the rest of the city slept, he began to build the case that would either clear Aaliyah's name or destroy the one who wanted her ruined. The next morning, Dominic called her into his office. His tone was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Close the door, Miss Monroe." Aaliyah obeyed, heart racing. He gestured for her to sit. "I've been hearing things," he said. "Rumors about you and me. Do you know who's spreading them?" She hesitated. The words felt heavy in her mouth. "Chanel Rivers," she said quietly. "My ex-friend. She works in HR. She's angry I wouldn't forgive her." Dominic leaned back, studying her face. His voice dropped lower. "Then we stop her." Aaliyah blinked. "Stop her? How?" "Legally. Properly. I won't let anyone weaponize gossip against you, or this company." For a second, she forgot to breathe. No one had defended her like that in years. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, but please, no special treatment." His gaze softened. "This isn't special. It's fair." When she left his office, her hands still trembled. Not from fear this time, but from the strange comfort of being believed. Days later, the tension thickened. Aaliyah noticed files missing small details, numbers out of place. Her presentation slides didn't match her drafts. At first, she blamed herself. Too much stress, too many late nights. But the mistakes multiplied. Faster, bolder. The deadline loomed. She stayed after hours, eyes burning, fingers flying across the keyboard. The city outside was sleeping, but she couldn't. Every click, every correction felt like a fight to keep her career alive. By midnight, she realized she was rebuilding the entire campaign from scratch. When she finally stopped, her hands shook from exhaustion. She leaned back in her chair, whispering to the empty room, "This isn't coincidence." Her email chimed, another deadline reminder. She closed her eyes, throat tight. Someone wanted her to fail. Someone who knew exactly where to hit. And, in the darkness of her office, Aaliyah felt something new stirring inside her. A quiet, furious strength. She wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, Dominic sat in his office long before sunrise. He had already pulled the IT access logs. Lines of data filled his screen. Timestamps, usernames, edits. One name repeated again and again. Chanel Rivers at Monarch Creative. Calm. She had accessed Aaliyah's files at 2:03 a.m. 17 changes, every one designed to make her fail. Dominic's jaw tightened. He rubbed his temple, then leaned back. "She's done," he muttered. He printed the evidence, every page clear and cold. It wasn't just sabotage, it was abuse of authority. As he stared at the documents, he thought of Aaliyah, alone in her office that night, fighting against invisible hands pulling her down. Rage flickered behind his calm. But he didn't act on anger, he acted on truth. He called legal, then HR's senior manager, not Chanel. By noon, the investigation had officially begun. Outside his window, Atlanta glimmered in morning light. Power, he thought, meant nothing if it wasn't used to protect. By the end of the week, Aaliyah was called back into his office. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, but her chin was lifted. Dominic stood beside the window, holding a thin folder. "I have proof," he said quietly. "Chanel accessed your files. We'll make it right, but it must be by the book." Aaliyah took a breath. "No favors. I want this clean. I earned my place here." Their eyes met, steady and strong. He nodded. "That's exactly why you deserve justice." For a moment, neither spoke. The weight between them shifted. Not romantic, but human. Two people fighting on the same side of something ugly. "Thank you," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. Thank yourself when this is over." When she left the room, Dominic stayed behind, looking out at the skyline. The power, the risk, the responsibility. Sometimes, words could ruin a career. Other times, they could save one. Monday morning arrived heavy with silence. Every employee was called to the main conference room. Whispers buzzed through the air like static. At the front stood the CEO, Thomas Sterling. Beside him, Dominic Cross, calm and unreadable. "Thank you for coming," Thomas began. "We need to address a serious matter." Murmurs faded. Eyes turned forward. "An internal investigation has confirmed that an employee violated company policy, accessing private files and spreading false information about a colleague." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Chanel Rivers," Thomas continued. "Please stand." Across the room, Chanel froze, pale as marble. Aaliyah sat still, heart pounding. "You are terminated effective immediately," Thomas said. "Security will escort you out." Chanel stammered, "She's lying. This is personal." Dominic stepped forward. His voice was calm but sharp. "The logs don't lie, and neither does your own signature." The room went silent. Chanel's eyes met Aaliyah's one last time, full of hate. Then she was gone. For the first time in months, Aaliyah felt her lungs fill fully. Justice had a sound. Quiet, clean, final. The room was still humming with whispers when Thomas stepped aside, giving Dominic the floor. He looked over the gathered faces, anxious, ashamed, curious, then began to speak. "Before we return to work," he said, his voice calm but steady, "there's something I need to make clear." He turned slightly, his gaze finding Aaliyah across the room. "Ms. Monroe has shown grace under pressure, the kind we value most in this company." The words landed like a balm over the tension. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten, her eyes sting. Dominic continued. "She didn't spread the rumors. She didn't retaliate. She simply did her job. Better than most could under such weight. That's what integrity looks like." For a moment, their eyes met. A brief, quiet exchange that said more than words could. Then he looked away, professional again. The meeting ended with polite applause, but the sound was different now. genuine, respectful. As Aaliyah gathered her things, she realized something had shifted. The weight she'd been carrying was finally gone. For the first time in months, she stood tall without having to defend herself. Later that afternoon, Dominic called her into his office once more. The door closed softly behind her, the same way it had the first time. But this time, the air felt different, lighter, expectant. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "That night," he said quietly, "wasn't random for me." Aaliyah froze. "I tried not to think about it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to face her, eyes steady. "I've been thinking about it every day." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they hadn't said. The hum of the city below seemed far away. She crossed her arms, not defensive, just trying to hold herself together. "It can't be that simple," she said. "Nothing about this is simple," he replied, "but I meant every word I said that night. You deserve better. You always did." Something inside her trembled. Not fear, but recognition. After months of silence, the truth finally had space to breathe. Aaliyah took a slow breath, eyes softening. "Then what now?" Dominic's voice was low. "Now we stop pretending." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable but his tone sure. "I want more," Dominic said, "but only if you want it too." Aaliyah's heart thudded against her ribs. Every reason to say no ran through her mind. Work, reputation, fear. But when she looked into his eyes, the noise inside her quieted. "I do," she said simply. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he reached for her, fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was careful, asking for permission. When their lips met, it wasn't desperate. It was steady, sure, real. The kiss carried all the moments they had swallowed in silence. Every meeting, every glance, every almost. When they finally pulled apart, Aaliyah was smiling. Small, unguarded, alive. Dominic whispered, "That's all I needed to know." For the first time since everything fell apart, she wasn't surviving. She was beginning again, with someone who saw her, not her scars. Outside, the world kept spinning. Inside, time had finally stopped running from them. The next day, Aaliyah came to his office for a project briefing. When she entered, Dominic was already waiting, a faint grin on his face. "I have something that belongs to you," he said, opening a drawer. He held up a small piece of red lace, the same panties she had left on that hotel pillow weeks ago. Her eyes widened, then laughter broke through her surprise. "You kept them?" she said, half embarrassed, half amused. "They were the only proof I had that you were real," he replied. "That night felt like a dream." Aaliyah shook her head, smiling through a sudden blur of emotion. "Guess the dream came back to haunt you," she teased softly. Dominic set the lace down on the desk and stepped closer. "More like it came back to stay." The moment was tender, playful, grounded, honest. When he kissed her this time, it was slower, certain, free from hesitation. And in that quiet office, love no longer felt like a risk. It felt like something earned. One evening, there was a knock on her apartment door. When Aaliyah opened it, Marcus stood there, unshaven, tired, holding flowers. "Aaliyah, please," he said. "She was crazy. You're my home." She stared at him for a long moment. The same man who had broken her now looked like a stranger. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I was never your home. I was your convenience." He blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I kept you comfortable while you figured out who you wanted to be," she said. "But I'm not that woman anymore." He stepped closer, desperation rising. "We can fix it. You still love me, I know you do." She shook her head. "No, I loved who I thought you were, not the man who betrayed me." For the first time, she saw him shrink. Smaller, uncertain. Aaliyah closed the door gently but firmly. Inside, she leaned against it, heart steady. No shaking, no tears, just peace. Behind her, life was waiting. Bright, new, untouched by the past. She smiled to herself, whispering, "Not this time." 6 months changed everything. Aaliyah Monroe, once the woman whispered about in hallways, now had her own office. Her name on the door. Senior strategist. Her reputation was spotless, her work respected. Clients asked for her by name. Colleagues sought her opinion. Every late night, every breakdown, had built her into someone stronger. When Dominic passed her desk that morning, their eyes met. Not secretive now, but steady and proud. They had disclosed their relationship months ago, exactly by company policy. No scandal, no whispers, just quiet respect. At the celebration lunch, Thomas raised a glass. "To Ms. Monroe," he said, "proof that integrity and talent always rise." The room applauded. Aaliyah smiled, calm and radiant. She wasn't defined by heartbreak anymore. She was defined by everything she'd become after. Later, as the noise faded, Dominic leaned close and whispered, "Senior strategist suits you." She laughed softly. "So does happiness." That night, the city shimmered beneath their window. Atlanta pulsed with life. Headlights, laughter, late trains humming through the dark. Aaliyah stood by the glass, watching the reflection of her own smile. Dominic came up behind her, his arms circling her waist. "Still, can't believe we met that night," he murmured against her hair. She tilted her head back slightly, eyes soft. "Worst night?" she said. "Best gift." They stayed like that, quiet, content. No grand words, no promises needed, just the sound of rain beginning to fall again, the same way it had the night they met. He kissed the side of her neck. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that bar?" She smiled. "Then I wouldn't have walked into my future." Outside, lightning flickered over the skyline. Brief, beautiful, fleeting. Inside, the storm had long passed. Life didn't suddenly turn perfect. Deadlines still came fast. Projects failed. Some nights they argued about work or time or exhaustion. But through it all, they learned. They learned that love didn't take away strength. It multiplied it. Aaliyah thrived under pressure now. She spoke with confidence in boardrooms, her ideas commanding attention. Dominic never overshadowed her. He lifted her quietly, letting her shine. At home, they laughed over takeout and mismatched wine glasses. Their apartment was full of music, unfinished conversations, and peace. One evening, as she reviewed campaign notes, he placed a coffee on her desk. "Still saving the world?" he teased. "Just the part I can reach," she said, smiling. He bent down and kissed her forehead. "That's the best part anyway." For Aaliyah, happiness no longer meant escaping pain. It meant building something stronger in its place. She often thought back to that night, the sound of the door creaking open, the sight she could never unsee. But now, it didn't sting the same. Standing by her window, coffee in hand, she whispered to herself, "If I hadn't walked in on that betrayal, I would still be living small, loving wrong, and never knowing what it felt like to be truly seen." The words hung in the quiet room, soft but powerful. Her reflection smiled back at her. Not the woman who broke, but the woman who rebuilt. The city stretched beyond the glass, endless and alive. Somewhere in its glow, a younger version of herself still stood in that hallway, heart in pieces. Aaliyah wanted to tell her, "You'll make it through," and maybe that was the truth. Some heartbreaks aren't endings, they're directions. Sometimes the worst night of your life leads you straight to the best version of yourself. Aaliyah had learned that pain isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of truth. She had been broken, humiliated, and betrayed, yet every scar had shaped the woman she became. Not bitter, not afraid, just real. She once thought love was about holding on, but now she knew it was about choosing peace. What she lost in comfort, she gained in power, the quiet kind that no one can take away. Because strength isn't loud. It's the moment you decide to keep walking when everything in you wants to stop. Her story wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Raw, beautiful, and honest. And maybe that's how healing works. You don't erase what broke you. You rewrite what comes after. If you've ever been broken and found your way back stronger, This story is your reflection, your reminder that pain can build, that endings can save, and that love, real love, begins where self-worth is finally found. Subscribe, because your story matters too.